Ladies and gentlemen, it seems that everything is kicking off all at once, as not only do we have some of the latest and greatest components on our desk here today, we're going to be building this all-white epic gaming PC build, but because it's the end of 2024, it seems that all of the new games are finally arriving all at once. Black Myth Wukong, Star Wars Outlaws, and I'm really excited for Dragon Age Vanguard. That will be my take a day off work game. But anyway, that's beside the point. Let's crack on with our build after saying a massive thank you to Gigabyte for actually sponsoring this video. Let's begin by actually having a look at our motherboard, because this is very much going to be the star of the show. But essentially what I'm trying to do here is to create a build that is very high-end, is going to be able to play everything at high settings, even a fair bit of 4K gaming, but I don't want this to cost like a stupid amount of money. The case is quite extravagant, but we've kind of, I don't want to say cut corners, but we've not spent unnecessary money, but we'll walk you through how we've done that throughout the video. But yes, as I say, this is going to be the star of the show, because this is actually one of the brand new components I have not used yet. It's been out for a month or two, I believe. Look how minimal this is. It's pretty ridiculous. We've seen boards that have had covers and things on them for years, but the main difference this time is that all of the connections, look, are actually on the back. So other than obviously putting your RAM in, CPU, SSDs, they do go underneath this cover, and then obviously your graphics card, all of those little annoying cables that like come out the bottom, and especially if you've got like a white build and you've got a few ketchup and mustard, this aims to actually clean that up by having all of the ports over the back. Now obviously, big caveat, do not buy one of these unless you're also going to be buying a case that accommodates it, because this is not going to work otherwise. But let's get ourselves a closer look, shall we, and actually start to take this apart a little bit. I mean, huge VRMs actually on this, so you shouldn't have to worry about cooling if using very high-end CPUs. But this is just a magnetic strip actually that removes, and then you've got your screw holes to secure this to your chassis. But down the bottom, you do have this very large heatsink actually. It does come off very easily, but it seems as soon as you put it on the box, it doesn't want to. There it is. Like it's just a catch. You kind of just need the right leverage essentially. And then that does remove. And as you can see, 2 of your SSDs will go there. You've got some thermal pads on this, and then this becomes the heatsink, which is quite cool. You do also actually have a completely tool-free SSD, which is hard to remove when you're holding it with one hand, but yep, there you are. But otherwise, that is pretty much good to go. It is obviously B650E, which is the way I would go for gaming, and you've obviously got a lot of USB ports and things on this as well. Wi-Fi at the top there, pretty much everything that you'll need. But now we have actually had a closer look at our board, I think it's time to get our gaming PC on the road. And what we're gonna do is use the brand new Ryzen, there's so many numbers, the brand new Ryzen 7 6700X. And immediately people are gonna be like, what? Why is he doing that? Are you insane, mate? What? Why? And I'll tell you why. It's essentially because the price of this has already started to come down a little bit. And in the US, the price of the 7800X 3D has gone up loads. So it might actually be worth looking at this, or probably the 7700X. It's kind of circumstantial really, but I would recommend most people go for the 7800X 3D if the price is good, which it is still in the UK, and hopefully it will soon be in the US. But at the moment, this is kind of like the closest we can get. And it's an 8-core chip, and it is a very good chip. It's just one that was priced a little bit too high really. But as I say, it is coming down, but this just inserts into our socket really easily, and then this removes. Also like the fact that they give you like a white CPU cover. Doesn't matter, because obviously no one's ever going to see this, but it's just a nice touch. With that installed, of course, you'll also need to grab yourselves a kit of memory or some RAM, and this is 32 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance RGB DDR5, and this is running at C36 at a speed of 5600 megahertz, but this is actually a XMP kit. I'd recommend you go for a Expo 6000 C30 if you can find it. Doesn't have to be Corsair. I find that the Corsair RAM definitely looks really good in white, and obviously you can control it with iQ. If nothing else is Corsair, it is a little bit of a waste really to have iQ just to control the RAM. Something like G-Skill or Kingston are also good options, but this is pretty reliable and you can usually get it for a pretty decent price. And then with that out of the way, we can press on, not to that, we've already done that, to our SSD, our next component. This is the Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus, and this drive that I've got here is probably a little bit different to the one you will get, because this is fairly old and they keep updating it, but usually it's a good price to performance drive. You can go for PCI Gen 5, as it helpfully reminds you here, but it's not really necessary for gaming, so I probably wouldn't bother. But you just drop this in, which is completely toolless, and then you grab this top piece, slide it over those screws, give it a press, and then that is good to go. But with our motherboard complete, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time to move on and get this installed inside our chassis. And first things first, we probably should explain what this is and why we're using it. Corsair 6500 series. You can buy an airflow version. I don't really think it makes that much sense, to be honest with you, because it will look better with the glass. And you actually have these fan mounts down the bottom, so if you populate those, you're going to get even more air in this. The base version does not come with any fans installed at all, so I've actually installed 3, and these are the AF120 Elites, but they now sell some RS fans that work on addressable RGB. That would probably be easier and cheaper. You need to populate those, or you just have like a massive hole in your case, which will look really weird. But the radiator that we're going to use will give us a 360 on the top, and if you're going for like a 4090 or like 5090 or whatever comes out by the time you might be watching this video, then yes, you could well populate the bottom slots as well. But let's see how easy this is to install then, shall we? Just line this up with the back of our chassis, and then there will be a little hole that kind of like catches the motherboard here, just like that. Then we can screw this down into position. And as we turn this over then and reveal exactly what this is going to look like, I will also say I've just realized that the person that had this board before me has lost the default AM5 retention bracket, which probably isn't going to be an issue for the cooler we're using, but just as an FYI, that's not standard, that's someone being naughty. But yes, this is what our rig is going to look like at the moment, and I want you to save this in your memory. That is technically like a PC joke, but barely, because it shouldn't look that different once we've plugged in all of the cables around the back. So remember that. Okay, right, let's spin this round and start to plug things in. And one of the downsides, I suppose, with going with reverse connection motherboards is that it can then be more difficult to plug things in around this side because it gets a little bit more cluttered. But if you built a gaming PC before, you'd be absolutely fine. And if you're new to it, well, get over it. I'm such a nice person to be around, aren't I? Anyway, let's start with our USB 3 down the bottom. Our USB-C is just above that. Front panel is right down here at the bottom, and then HD audio is all the way at the bottom right. Actually, before we move on to the next bit, I do also need to grab the controller out of this box for our fans. And this is another reason that I say if you just go for like the standard addressable RGB versions, you won't have to worry, but then you won't have the full control. So pick your poison. We plug the USB in, we plug in all of our fans. We'll also do our fan power connections, or fan speed technically. And then I want you to firmly recall your memory banks. And is this the same? The answer should be yes. And this is the whole point of this. I love it because especially in something like this that looks so clean, as I say, it lets your components do the talking. And when you have such an attractive case that makes an attractive motherboard and soon to be an attractive GPU, the whole thing is just pure chemistry, baby. This sort of thing ain't my bag, baby. If you don't know that joke, shame on you. And actually, rather unusually, the next thing I want to do is to actually grab our power supply out of the box. We don't necessarily need to worry about the cables just yet. This is from Corsair RN850, pretty reliable PSU, and the fan will obviously need to be facing this way so it can actually breathe. But otherwise, this just drops into position like that, you see? I mean, to be fair, because this case is so big, we may as well just do all of the cables while we're here, right? So obviously we need our RTX, our CPU, a SATA connection, and then yes, I'm afraid I am going to have to cheat. Because we're using an NVIDIA graphics card that uses the new standard, I would advise that you buy a third-party cable. I mean, this is actually a Corsair one for their own PSUs, but this means you won't have to use a horrible adapter look, because it is your 12 or 16 pin connection that plugs straight into the PSU and then is going to look nice and neat. And if you're going to all of this effort to go for stealth motherboards, then clearly that one cable that you are going to see does need to look nice. To get these connected then, and while we're down here, I'll grab the SATA connection for our fans. And then this is what I mean about the CPU look. It's really frustrating because this cage is in the way, but you can make it work with just one. So you will have to remove this cage and then kind of go through the case. I'd love to show you this, I really would, but I can't. I feel like a right numpty because I keep going to feed the cables through to the other side and then remembering that no, they are actually on this side. I noticed as well that there is, I'll turn this around so you can see, there is actually an HDMI port on this board here. I wonder what that's for. Anyway, just grab your cable, plug that into the top. You will then obviously get a fair bit of bulk of cable all in the same place, but actually that isn't too bad because it's just one cable left to go for our GPU, and obviously we can't plug that in yet. So we're gonna park this in here for now, but otherwise that's pretty much the back of this done. It's just the CPU cooler and the GPU to go. And I will go for the CPU cooler next, as obviously the GPU will get in the way. And this is one of the ways that we've saved ourselves some money actually, because people do want to go for 360 all-in-ones, especially in a case like this because they look great, but the Corsair tax, if you like, on components like this is very high. Montech seem to do it for a lot less. This one is the Hyperflow ARGB 360. You can find this for about 90, 95 pounds, dollars, something like that. Obviously there is going to be some variation, but this comes in both black and white. And I think I've used the black one before, but this looks pretty new, so you get the out-of-the-box experience with me. Oh, doesn't smell of anything. But I love the fact that Montech have actually pre-installed the fans for you on this. Oh, saves you so much time. Looks to be a decent amount of room actually up here, and all of the connections are on the back, so we're not going to have to fiddle about between this, which is nice. Oh. This is going to be the one time that we're using a cooler that needs the default AM5 hardware, isn't it? Oh, I need the hardware. I'll nick it from one of the normal ice boards. I mean, to be fair, it's quite a good comparison. Look, stealth, no stealth, stealth, no stealth. And assuming that's the same, this should just go over the top and then screw it into position. And I've got to say, this Montech cooler is one of the easiest all-in-ones I've ever installed, especially on AMD, because you don't really need to change anything at all. Fans are pre-applied, and then, as I say, you just whack this on top. It's got thermal compound, so really nice, straightforward, and very, very simple. I love radiators. I just don't like default AM5 mounting hardware when it's not in the box. But I am now ready to get our next and final component ready. That's the back of the box. This is the front, the graphics card. But that doesn't matter here today because the Aero, I think it's probably the best looking white GPU range you can get. And a lot of people like it as well because it doesn't rely on like loads of RGB lighting and all of this like over the top stuff. The design itself does the talking. Now this is an RTX 4070 Super. So this is a really powerful GPU. Again, this is going to be pretty much perfect for any game, especially if you're playing like high-end 1440p, even a little bit of 4K, especially if you're using like DLSS, it's going to work really well. Only thing I'd be aware of is that this only has 12 gigabytes of VRAM, which is absolutely fine pretty much for essentially all games today. But going into the future, I would say that if you stepped up to a 4070 Ti Super, that comes with 16 gig and is probably going to be a little bit more future-proof. But it depends what you play, the resolution, settings, all of this stuff. But yeah, really capable card. Let's get this inside our system. And I've got to be honest that this is probably one of the few times that I really do wish we were going for a vertical GPU mount, because I think that would look so epic down here. It would kind of sit right like that. It would look really, really cool. But even in the default configuration, this is still going to look pretty sensational. I've got the cover on. Would probably help if I took that out. Should just slide in with a push. And then, yeah, there you have your very minimal 6500 rig. We literally just need to screw this in, feed our power cable through from the other side, drop this into position, and then, ladies and gentlemen, I think we are done. I mean, yes, there is going to be a little bit of management to do around the back, but if you're like me, and let's be honest, you're just a bit of a stuffer, then this is going to be the perfect configuration for you because you don't really need to do anything. This is a really cool looking rig, isn't it? And I think as soon as we get this turned on and we get a little bit of lighting, it's going to quite literally come alive. This is what it looks like at present with no work whatsoever. Yeah, there are definitely some cables and things to sort of tie up, but again, it's not necessary per se, but obviously it is going to be good practice. But you don't need to worry about airflow or anything here because there's not anything other than this hub. I will also say as well that I don't know whether this motherboard will support the Ryzen 9000 chips without a BIOS update. I'm 50-50 about it because it's a new board, but let's find out. Wish us luck. Wow, okay, yeah, I like that. I'm a proper sucker for like an ice blue build, maybe like ice blue and white alternated. So yeah, this is definitely standing out to me. I think this rig looks absolutely incredible. I love the glass on the front, I love the door, and I love how easy it was to build in. But that aside, it does look as if we are not getting a display. So what we're going to do is grab the latest BIOS from the website. We're going to put it on a USB flash drive, FAT32. So we have our BIOS, we'll whack that in the back, press the button. It's stressful, but essentially you'll get a flashing light and you just wait for it to stop flashing. You know if it's done because the whole system will be completely off, or it'll restart and then you should get a signal on your display. You know what, actually, it might have just been that this monitor was set to HDMI, not DisplayPort. We're on DisplayPort this time, please. Please, yes! I was actually kind of worried that that wasn't going to work. All right, good. So what I'm going to do now is go into the BIOS. I'm going to enable XMP, or the Expo memory profile, and then I'm going to go and tune all of our fans so that they're nice and quiet, and then we're going to come back and we're going to proceed by looking at the games. That doesn't sound that fun, looking at the games. We're going to be playing the games, yeah! And so then, ladies and gentlemen, through the power of a good night's sleep, a new t-shirt and a bowl of strawberry crisp, here we are all set up and ready to go. And actually have made a couple of changes. First one being that with the latest BIOS update on these boards, there is actually now a higher TDP mode that changes the 65 to 105 for the new Ryzen 9000, which is pretty cool. We've enabled that and it will get you more performance, but obviously at the cost of a little bit more power consumption. Only other thing to say was that I was actually able to color match these fans quite well with the iCUE software. So if you did want to replicate exactly what we've got, actually it works quite well, not too shabby at all. There's a nice mode here so we can kind of get that purple and blue effect, and you'd never know that they were different fans. So all in all, so far so good. But let's jump into the games. And if you don't know what this is, well, this is certainly the title that has caused a little bit of a stir. Now, this is Star Wars Outlaws, and the game is very, very pretty. There's no doubt about that. It's a bit weird because usually when something is a pretty game, it's all good. But this is kind of like so good in some places and then just a little bit weird in others. And actually, it's the animations in the game when you're looking at the cinematics. They're just whack. I just don't really understand what's gone wrong there. It's like the just haven't put that much effort into the animations. But anyway, this is the title, and we're currently running this at the high preset, and this is running really nicely actually at around about 80 frames a second, and it feels really good. And the way to verify this is to have a look at our latency at the top right corner of our screen, and you can see we're getting around about 30 milliseconds or so. So bearing in mind this is running at 4K, but with DLSS set to performance, no frame gen, I am actually really happy with this result. I would advise that you have a look in the gameplay menu. This should be in the visuals, but it's not. So actually change the view angle to around about 100, and then when you turn off the 21:9 cinematic mode, this kind of looks more normal. In terms of CPU utilization, well, we're currently getting a pretty even spread across our 8 cores actually. Nothing to worry about there. If you look at the green graph, that is our GPU usage, that's how bottlenecked we are, and as long as that is around about 98% or above, which it is, it means we are bottlenecked by our GPU, and as a result the game is really nice and smooth, so working pretty well. If you want even higher fidelity, you should be able to go into the graphics options, find NVIDIA RTX direct lighting, and then we'll set this to medium, turn ray reconstruction on as well. And then when we return to our game, well, you can now see that obviously our frame rate is now reduced. We're looking at around about 55 FPS or so, but because we still have frame generation enabled, this isn't necessarily like a real 55 FPS, and our acid test of the latency has now increased past the 55 millisecond mark to the point where you can now actually see and feel really that the game's not quite as tight. I mean, to be fair, this actually isn't too bad, but as soon as you get into firefights and things, I think you would start to notice a little bit. But there would definitely be people that would be happy to play like this. I'd say that visually the game's definitely improved. It's not night and day, but it's just everything's almost a little bit clearer. It's a bit more realistic. Something like this that you really do want to look fantastic, I'd say that it certainly does. But yeah, that latency is a little bit too high. So let's go back into the settings, change the upscaler to performance, turn frame gen off. And is this now going to be playable? Well, no, not really. Around about 45 FPS, so obviously if you're used to this, then great. But I mean, you've got so much horsepower on offer, but this is an example of the sort of game, if you want all of the bells and whistles, you will have to spend more on an even more expensive graphics card. From a game that didn't quite meet expectations to one that has actually blown people's away, this is now something completely different. We are playing as, is he a gorilla? Is he a monkey? Not entirely sure, but yes, this is Black Myth Wukong, and this is got to be one of the best looking games ever. It is ridiculous just how good this looks. Of course, this does come with a performance penalty though. It's nice that it's fairly scalable. You don't have to run it at the highest quality settings, which I believe is cinematic. What we've got running here is very high, and we're getting around about 70 FPS, but as you can see, our PC latency is around about 67 milliseconds, so this is a little bit higher than I would like it again. Let's see what happens if we turn this down to high though. And to be fair, this is actually pretty much exactly what we needed, because our latency is now under 50 milliseconds, which is cool. We've got a little bit of headroom. The frame rate hasn't increased massively. We're now looking at around about 80 FPS rather than 70, but as I say, this is just going to give you a little bit more edge, a little bit more tightness to the overall gameplay. We'll turn this down to 1440p, we'll set DLSS to balanced, and then we will turn full ray tracing on and we'll set this to low. And actually, because we've turned the resolution down, our frame rate and latency have now got better. We're looking around about 105 FPS with a latency of about 40. So this is definitely going to be the sweet spot, really. This is I don't want to say that this is a 1440p card, because on most games you are going to be able to play them at 4K, and as we showed, even in something like Star Wars Outlaws, which is ridiculously intense, you can still play that at 4K. But if you've got like a high resolution 1440p monitor, then clearly this is going to be an epic GPU, really, because you're not going to be using as much VRAM and you are going to be getting even higher levels of FPS. You can use ray tracing, all of that good stuff. But ladies and gentlemen, the time for talking about ray tracing and fancy effects is well and truly over. Let's jump into the real meat of what you're going to be playing, the multiplayer games. And this is some Apex Legends, and we're actually doing a little bit of a demo, because this is the brand new DirectX 12 beta that they've got running, and they've said that the performance of this is going to be better on VRAM, but I guess at the time of filming, because this is still beta, it could actually be a slightly lower frame rate than the usual DX11 mode. But as you can see, running this at 4K, just under absolute max settings, we're still getting a sky-high frame rate, and we are properly maxing out the refresh rate of our monitor, which is 4K 144. This definitely goes to show, doesn't it, that if you do want to mix the visuals of 4K with the performance of high frame rates, it definitely can be done in Apex Legends. But let's try 1440p and then see what that's done to the frame rate. Well, as you'd expect, it has pretty much gone through the roof. We're not quite at that magical 300 FPS that's actually capped by the engine, but we are not that far off, as it does peak every now and then around about 280 or so. I definitely would advise that you're looking at a very high-end monitor in order to get the most out of this if you do play a lot of Apex Legends. Oh, so there we are then, folks. I think everything you need to know about our system. What do you make of it? Do you like the looks of this? Do you like the performance? Would you spend more? Would you spend less? I think all in all, the only real changes I would make to this system would just be to add those extra fans down the bottom to give it a more complete look. And as we've said, if you did want to go for even more performance, obviously upgrading that GPU would be a great idea, but it's more cost and it's already a very expensive PC. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this. Get yourself subscribed, and if you do want to check out current pricing on anything that was featured in this video, you can find those in the description. But thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.